Welcome to the Power Panel. I'm Tina Comrie, the CEO of the Attention Agency. And firstly, thank you very much for taking a couple of hours out of your very busy days to come and join us for what I hope will be a very thought-provoking and inspiring session on all things AI, particularly its impact on sales and marketing. I have to do the housekeeping, so just a quick note about toilets and fire exit, pretty much exactly where you came in, front door. The toilets are right next to that. The order of events tonight will be, I'll shortly introduce our keynote speaker. He'll take us through the journey of AI, well, why we're here right now, why it's such a hot topic, and help you think about how that journey might look inside your business. So hopefully you'll leave here today with some really insightful, actionable stuff. Following that, we'll have the panel discussion. We'll have about a half an hour chat and then questions from you guys. So if you have any burning questions, please save those for the end. We're really happy to hear them. When we're all wrapped up in here, please do feel free to join us in the foyer bar. We've got some beautiful catering from Little Wolf out there in the foyer afterwards. And our team and speakers will be around if you've got any specific questions that perhaps burning a hole you didn't put your hand up or you didn't get answered. We'd love to talk to you about those. Anyway, when it came time to decide for what the theme was for our Power Panel this year, it was a no-brainer. We didn't even spend more than 10 seconds on it, really. It had to be AI. There has been such excitement and also so much fear and just general palpable feeling of change is upon us. And we just knew that we had to be talking about that. We are asked about it every day in the course of our day-to-day jobs as a marketing agency, and speaking to different business owners in all sorts of sectors. Everyone has the same sort of feeling. We don't want to be left behind, but we don't really know what to do that's the right thing to do. So, of course, that's the thing. And then it didn't really take me, I didn't have to look very far to find a keynote speaker for this evening. Obviously, it is my husband, Josh Comrie. So this is a little unusual for a keynote speaker introduction. I did ask him how he would like to be introduced, and he said something like, just tell him I'm the perfect mix between Elon Musk and Ryan Reynolds. Obviously, cueing a massive eye roll from me. And he's also, clearly a bit of a comedian. But in all seriousness, he is one of the best people in New Zealand to talk to us about this. He has founded half a dozen successful businesses, primarily in tech, one of which is one of the four leading and early ventures, Ambit AI. And so he's been talking about this since at least 2017. And he's also been an investor in about 50 other startups. And so he sees an awful lot of this technology hype, implementation in other businesses as well. So that's enough from me. Please welcome our speaker, Josh Comrie.
It's really weird. I was about to go and shake Tina's hand. That's what I wanted to do. Hey, so in 1965, a gentleman called Gordon Moore postulated that computers would roughly double in power and halve in price every 18 months. Fast forward to today, we know that that prediction has largely held true. So we refer to that dictum as Moore's Law. In 2016, I was talking to my mum. And Mum said to me, darling, what is it you're up to in business these days? And I said, Mum, I've started an AI company. She pondered, she looked confused for a second. And she looks at me and she says, but darling, you know nothing of artificial insemination. And that story's true. But what I had forgotten, to my detriment, is the vital role of context in conversation. And context will play a big part in the way that you consider and consume things in relation to artificial intelligence. So recall that term in the back of your mind, context, the absolute vitality of context. So Gordon's postulation is an exponential postulation. Doubling every 18 months is an exponential postulation. Now, human beings are remarkably bad at understanding big numbers and also underestimating change over time. Bill Gates once said that we overestimate what will happen in the course of a year and underestimate what will happen over the course of a decade. So let me bring this to light for you in a way that might make sense, because understanding exponential power and its impact upon computing will really arm you well to know that the future is going to move a lot quicker than what you potentially think that it will today. So my step is around about a metre, right? Can we agree upon that? Is that a fact? It's around about a metre, okay? If I do another one, that's 2 metres. Now let's imagine that I'm applying exponential multiplication to each one of those steps. My first step is 1 metre, my second one is 2, my third one is 4, my next one is 8. Thank you, that wasn't a trick. By the time I reach 20 steps, I will have gone from Auckland to Christchurch. That's 1,500 kilometres. At 26 steps, I will have circumnavigated the globe, 46,000 kilometres. By the time I reach 30 steps, I will have reached the moon. It's about 400,000 kilometres. At my 38th step, so that is 8 steps further than the moon, I will have reached the sun. That's 150 million kilometres away. I'll say that again. 1 metre, 2 metre, 4 metre, 8 metre. Keep on doubling that. By the time I get to my 38th step, I'll have reached the sun. I'll be getting my ass fried in Kelvin. And so understanding that that sits in behind the experiences that we are being given today through technology will arm you really well to kind of go, the future is exciting, but a little unclear. Josh Comrie. So I'm a founder. I founded a range of different things in the technology space. This business here, Potentia, was putting people into organisations to build AI projects way back in 2012. In 2016 I started Ambit, which was New Zealand's first artificial intelligence platform company. And then down the bottom is just an example of some of the range of businesses that I've invested in, and these are in the artificial intelligence space. The thing that I'm hoping to be most proud of is this guy over here, Pave, New Zealand's first digital payroll giving, so it's a charity. So I'm pretty excited about that. More on that for a different talk. So when there's an opportunity for a new piece of technology that gets particularly frothy, a whole lot of people pile into that space. And a lot of people are purporting to be experts. I don't purport to be an expert, I'm a business person, and I have an interest in this space because it's very emergent and it has the ability to have a great deal of impact upon the world. And so I was watching a video the other night, and it was a young guy, about 21, 22 years old, and he lived in Dubai, a Kiwi boy, and he was purporting to be an expert in artificial intelligence. I bring this slide up now because there's a lot of folk that are around in the space that are offering services, offering advice, and it's really important to understand that word again, context, about what they bring to the table. If they have done nothing else beforehand, or nothing that's relevant to your business, or nothing that's relevant to your goals or objectives, then just question what use they may be, what efficacy they may have inside your business. Just a safe warning. To understand the future, we must look to the past. Around about 10,000 years ago, collectively, as a species, we decided that what we would do is put down our broccoli and our moose head, pick up a hammer, and start to construct villages and towns and cities, and embed ourselves in societies as a group. We've had a number of different changes over time, but the first that we recognise as the first industrial revolution was in the mid-1700s, and it was sparked from the invention of the steam engine. So the steam engine, around about 100 years later, was replaced by electricity. So the second industrial revolution was in the late 1800s, centred around New York, and it was founded based upon bringing power to the factory, to the enterprise, and ultimately to people's homes. So you could say the second industrial revolution was powered by power. In 1958, Texas Instruments invented the first microprocessor. It changed the world as we know it today. And so that microprocessor went on to power computers and the supercomputer, then individual desktop, etc. And so that was the third industrial revolution, and really when we started to get quite concerned about the impact of technology upon the world. In the mid-2010s, we had, through the advent of ubiquitous broadband and through cloud providers giving us the ability to build amazing applications on this cheap supercomputing power, we had what was now known as the fourth industrial revolution, and so that's powered by artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, whatever those things may be. And so consistently throughout time, as we've seen these growth and changes of technology, we've had the occasional hiccup and concern about technology. I suspect you will have all heard of the Luddites. The Luddites existed in the 1700s, and they were a collection of people following a man called Luddite. And they were concerned about the knitting loom taking the jobs from the weavers that existed in these villages. And so they took up arms and they smashed up the machines. The industrialists appealed to the king, they lobbied the king, and they said, King, can you sort this out for us, please? And so he assembled another army, and the second army fought the Luddites in a series of battles. At one point, there was more of the king's army fighting the Luddites than were fighting Napoleon. Just to put it in perspective, so it was the first and also the last greatest resistance to technology, but it wasn't the last great concern that we had about technology taking our jobs or our livelihoods. So what about AI? In the 1940s, you'll probably have heard of Alan Turing. He was involved in cracking the Enigma code, which, thanks to his and many other people's great work, we live in the free world and we don't speak German as a native language. And so he went on to stick around in the technology space, and he coined the term artificial intelligence in the 1950s. So money started to pour in the 1960s. We had some pretty basic microprocessors. So some pretty cool things were getting done, but they really lacked a use case. In other words, there wasn't a feasible or a practical application for this technology. So we're into this thing that's called now the AI winter. And so the AI winter was a lack of money that was kicking around and was really the domain of the universities and the institutes. In the 90s, IBM was flush with cash and fresh from a whole bunch of success from being reinvented by Lou Gerstner. And they invented a machine that was called Deep Blue. Now, Deep Blue had a sole purpose, a very skinny, narrow purpose, and that was to play chess against the world champion, Garry Kasparov. Deep Blue won. Not the first match, the second match. Garry said that his gameplay wasn't terrifically good, and he wrote the machine off at the time. Subsequently, he said actually the machine had learned from the first loss and was able to counteract his moves before going into that match. And so it was a really interesting point in history where we started to see that technology could really, in a lot of ways, in specific ways, be better than human beings. We had some specific consumer-related applications. I had one of those Roomba vacuum cleaners used to chase my dog's dig around the house. He hated it. My ex-wife loved it. The Abo was a cute robot dog, so continuing on with the dog theme. Then nothing really happened until about the 2010s, and this was again a consequence of ubiquitous broadband. Most of us were getting fibre at around about that stage. 4G, 5G was coming online. And so we started to see some really cool applications built by my company and amongst others that enabled us to get our hands on artificial intelligence. So there was some useful digital assistants and organisers. I'm not sure if Siri is useful yet. I still get frustrated by having to try and understand my New Zealand accent. Tesla does amazing things with self-driving cars and autonomous vehicles. And of course Netflix knows exactly what we want to watch before we're about to watch it. So all of these things have been powered by AI. So whilst AI is very much in the front of mind at the moment, it's actually been in our worlds for quite some time. The 2020s, specifically November last year, things started to get really, really exciting. So we're up to the current day. And so this is when a range of generative AI technology started to come available into the market. So about July of last year was when OpenAI released ChatGPT, and then in November they released that license to the world. And so, who is a ChatGPT fan? Let's look at in the room if I can. So that's about 80% of people in the room. Cool, that's really great, that's good to see. And so that's led to a couple of other things that came out of a similar sort of time. Midjourney, which is incredible at building images, so you can get a command prompt and it makes an incredible image. Probably end up in video as well, and then Canva if you're in the space of graphic design. So, meet the hype cycle. Gartner likes to predict where things will be going in the future, and they plot out over time the adoption of technology. So this here is called the innovation trigger. It's basically where something starts. It's either a change in a piece of technology or it's being put into people's hands in a way that is different from what has come in previous times. So this is the trigger. Then we move on to the peak of inflated expectations. In other words, we all expect it to do everything for us, and we're absolutely buzzing about the array of capability and tasks that it can take on our behalf. That unfortunately was followed by a hangover, pretty nasty one. It's a trough of disillusionment. Now we drop down into this bit here once we realise that there's a cost that's involved. Perhaps the capability isn't what we once thought it was. Our team hasn't had the uptake and adoption of that technology in the way that we anticipated from the outset. So a lot of people, they leave and they walk away from the technology, which is really interesting. And that leaves us to kind of work our way back up the curve here into the point of the plateau of productivity. In other words, lots of people are using it to do lots of good things. Now, This is 2022. We yet see the 2023 one. It will be coming out next month. It'll be interesting to see whether it plots the generative AI, but that's generative AI underneath the arrow. 2017, it was in the same place. It was really interesting when I found this chart, the updated chart. What I realised through conversation with others is that we have completed the cycle. So at this point, we dropped down into the trough. People realised that it wasn't going to do what they hoped it would do. It was expensive. And then we gradually and quietly crept our way out of this disillusionment phase into the point of productivity. And now we're back up on top of the curve again, which is really interesting. So history has a way of repeating itself. Thus, as I said at the start, to understand the future, look to the past. So what's the adoption like? Unbelievable, in a word. Spectacular. So at the top, Netflix grew pretty quickly, right? So it came onto the scene in 1999, took 3.5 years to get to 1 million users, which was pretty quick at the time, and it was reinventing how we consumed content, particularly video and movie content. In 2004, Facebook took 10 months to get to 1 million users. In November of last year, OpenAI released ChatGPT. It took 5 days to get to 1 million users. It took 2 months to get to 100 million users. Nothing had been seen like it up until that point in time. I do feel obliged to point out, however, that something has surpassed it. You're brilliant, so you know what I'm going to say. I don't think it counts though. So Threads, which is the social Twitter alternative that's come out from Meta. So within 1 hour, they reached 1 million users, and within 5 days, they reached 100 million users. Now I think Facebook and Meta cheated. Firstly, because they're actually not releasing new technology. It's simply an alternative to whatever cluster mess Elon has made with Twitter. And of course they had an initial massive user base to draw from Meta and from Instagram, so they could promote and convert people very quickly. I think it was one button. I chose not to get onto that platform because there's too much social noise that exists as it stands anyway. So if you consider OpenAI's ChatGPT as a standalone, getting to 100 million users within 2 months is absolutely, it's remarkable. It really is remarkable. And it just shows the enthusiasm and the desire that people have to get this technology into their lives. So, a little bit of Mr. Bean. So what we have experienced up till this point in time is what in technology we refer to as innovation theatre. That means that a lot of the innovation is cobbled together with a bit of sticky tape, some spreadsheets, some smoke and mirrors, and a bunch of offshoring. The logos that I showed you earlier, the ones that I'll talk to shortly, are not in that space. This is the real deal. We're at the real point of true automation being able to be put into businesses and into consumers' hands, which is really exciting. This beautiful thing here is a quantum computer. So quantum computing has been commercially available for a relatively short period of time. If you ask any technologist worth their salt what quantum computing is about, they'll endeavour to give you an explanation. They'll look a bit confused, and then they'll say, we actually don't really completely know how it works. Which is kind of exciting that we've made this thing, but also a little bit terrifying that we've made this thing. And so quantum computing in and of itself is the ability to process so many different things concurrently, and so therefore the power, the processing power, the output power is unlike anything else that we've seen before. When you go digging for an explanation, you come across particles and waves, and so it's right down at the physics level, the quantum physics level. So unlike Mr. Bean, which is smoke and mirrors, this is not smoke and mirrors, this is actually more like magic, and it's really exciting. I'd encourage you to look into quantum computing if you haven't done so already. You'd have to be living under a rock to not know that we are going through what is the modern equivalent of the most acute labour shortage we've faced of all time. There's just not enough people to fill the skilled jobs that we've had. And this has really been trending since about 2019, but the pandemic really just kicked this into overdrive. And so the world is short of talent. So whenever there's a supply and demand issue, we've created essentially a vacuum. Nature abhors a vacuum, and so what's kind of cropping into that space is generative AI. The cloud revolution has been going on for a number of years now. And so for most of us these days, we consume a component, or in totality, our businesses are sitting to some degree on the cloud. So this is the environment that sits in a data center, which gives us the chance to tap into data on tap. In about 2007, a very visionary CEO said to me that At one point in the future, we'll be able to consume data like power, and that is the reality that we live into today. So what about us humans? Are we going to be freed, or are we going to be doomed? Interestingly, as a species, we're getting more intelligent. If you IQ test someone today, and they were of average intelligence today, and you sent them back in time and did the same IQ test 100 years ago, they would be in the top 2% of the populace. We're increasing every decade by about 3 IQ points. So we're getting smarter as a species. We're getting smarter in specific areas though, actually I should say in broad areas, because our superpower is the ability to integrate broadly. It's the ability to integrate broadly, not to have narrow specialisation. So the machines, they're all about narrow specialisation. Human beings, it's our ability to integrate broadly. That's the first reason they're not going to be doomed, because we are getting smarter. The second is around productivity. So whenever you apply technology to a production problem, what you see is an increase in production, and we therefore become more efficient. So we're producing more with less. Over time, prices drop, people have more money, so they start to spend that money on other things. So we get demand created in different areas of the economy and the world. Slotting into that space is people that are starting new businesses. Those businesses require new skills and different skills. And so consequently, we're creating new jobs where the old jobs no longer exist. So the jobs that have been replaced by the machines, that will happen. And just like the outsourcing revolution, just like the automation revolution, it will absolutely happen. But we'll be creating new jobs as we go. A really good way to ponder this is that if you think about the top 10 most in-demand jobs 10 years ago versus today, it's around about a 20% crossover. Around about 20% crossover. So 80% of the jobs that are very popular today and massive demand today, they didn't exist or they weren't in the top 10 years ago. And so that will play out into the future. In the 1980s, computers on the desktop started to get to the point of being quite helpful and having a reasonable amount of power. Moore's law, exponential growth in technology. Everyone remembers the 1980s, we went from a green screen to something that had a little bit more capability. We had mice that were kicking around. We started to get some really cool programs. And so a guy called Hans Moravec started to do some research into what's the difference between the machine versus the human. What is the machine good at versus what is the human good at? And so we often, frequently, Moravec's paradox is that we have different strengths and weaknesses. So the machines are really, really great at crunching large amounts of data, doing things that require high levels of accuracy, doing things like gameplay. As we now know, chess and AlphaGo went on to beat the World Go champion as well. And so give it very complex and very specific things to do, the machine will excel and beat us all day, every day. As human beings, however, our superpower is context over content. So our ability to read situations and apply our knowledge across different domains is the human's superpower. So we've got a choice. We've got a range of choices. What do we do about this? All right, so working to the current day, I'm an employer or an employee inside a business. What do I do about this? Well, I'd like to see the world on a continuum, if I possibly can. And in this context, in this continuum, at one end, we've got the mighty ostrich. You can choose to stick your head in the sand and think that nothing's going to change, business is going to be the same next year as it was last year, and we should all be fine. At the other end, we've got the replace mentality. So robotics has been a thing in the manufacturing environment for quite some years, but it's only just coming into the knowledge workers environment. And so I know of a number of entrepreneurs rubbing their hands together in glee that are going, I'm looking forward to the day when I don't have any staff. My counsel to them is perhaps that's not as close as you think that it may be, because of what we're talking about in a second, but the most effective mechanism that we all are agreeing upon right now is to augment the humans, just like Robocop did, augment the humans with a machine. And so establish the best functions that are held by the machine, which is narrow, focused, and crunching large amounts of data and information, whereas the human, context, not content. So I like to consider this the rise of the digital employee. I use the term intentionally, digital employee, because they're not a slave, they're not a servant, they're an employee inside your business. Unlike a real employee, however, they're always on, 24/7, 365. They never have to have a break. They don't have any holidays. They're never sick on a Monday. They're always able to work their way through whatever you need them to do. and they don't speak out of turn or say things that are outside or contrary with what your brand representation in the market is. Comparatively, they're inexpensive at this current point in time. That may change as we move through time. And they do, however, require securing. So you need to ensure that the information that you're feeding it is in your walled domain, your walled garden. It's not being shared with the world. And they also require training. Compliments, feedback, tweaking, and the ability for them to improve. You improve with them is a really key thing to consider when working with artificial intelligence. So you'll be asking, what should I automate? I like to think of the world through the 4 Ds. Is the work particularly dull? Do you find your staff falling asleep at their workstation? Is there a lot of repetition involved in their work? Perhaps you should automate because that's dull. Are people not turning up to work? Are they turning up missing a limb, missing a hand, missing a finger? And that might be dangerous. That could be a time for automation as well. Dirty, unsanitary conditions, great thing for the machines to do. And lastly, are you paying a fortune for something that you think could be done for a relative fraction of that price? That's where the dear thing comes in. So think about the 4 Ds. As I mentioned earlier on, we've moved from innovation theatre into true innovation. And also the other aspect of that is we've moved from swing chair innovation, which essentially was taking information and data from one terminal, swinging a chair and then putting it into another one. That has also ceased. And so the opportunities abound inside your business to automate. So how to create the conditions for success inside your business? Conceive of a little model, the org model. It's pretty simple, but it's very straightforward. So the first is, you need to understand where you're going. So set a vision for the future and create some context for that vision. So what is it that we would like to be able to do inside our business as it relates to technology and the deployment of that technology? You need to then get the buy-in from the people that are around you at a company level, so have a vision for that use, at an individual level and also at a team. So talk to people constantly what it means for them to work with this technology. People will be excited and some people will be afraid as well. And so communicating regularly about what that vision is really, really important. And so that means get the vision, get the understanding of where you're going into the future, and then assess your current state. So that means look at your current technology stack, looking at what it is that you utilise, the licenses that are in place, the ability for it to integrate, where that data sits inside the organisation, because data is king when it comes to utilising AI. And then have a really clear understanding of what your team's capability as well, because it's likely that you'll need to bring some people in to augment and support your current team if they're unwilling to go on that journey as it relates to AI. Then look at the gap analysis. This is pretty straightforward kind of strategic stuff that's here, right? But it's just applying it into a different domain. Look at the gap analysis, which is you know where you're going, you know where you are, so work out what's in the gap and what you need to do to get there. And so that means finding a use case. A use case is really critical, by the way. If you're not intimate with how to build effective use cases, then I'd encourage you to go on a bit of a self-learning journey, because knowing how you can apply it into your business would be incredibly useful for you. Otherwise, you'll end up just kind of scattergunning the approach and then not really seeing any demonstrable benefit from it. The last is you need to continually build for success. So that's building communities inside your business, continue to train your people, and continue to train the AI as well. This is on a simple visual. For those unfamiliar with the Lean Startup methodology, build, test, learn, build, test, learn. Pick something small, double down on that thing if it works. Don't invest the farm, so don't put your whole business at risk through deploying some form of technology. Don't please do big bang. Big bang means that you change your whole business to suit a piece of technology. Please don't do big bang. The idea with this is to begin something small, build a vision of where you're going over time, and then iterate based upon the use of that technology and the feedback that it gives you. There's some gotchas, there's always some gotchas. The first is security. So that's data security. You've probably heard of the instances of people feeding sensitive company data into ChatGPT, and that then being available for other people, either strategy or customer data. So currently, ChatGPT is open source. So if you know the way to find data that's been entered into ChatGPT, you can. Security is paramount. The thing that sits in behind that is ensuring that you've got an effective and robust data model, so the access to that data is effective and you control that data as well. So be really, really conscious and aware of the security aspects. If the experience is great and the price is free, you're the product. If the experience is great and the price is free, you are the product. So currently with ChatGPT, you are the product, unless you're paying for it, and even then, I'd perhaps caution you at $20 a month that, you know, for the ChatGPT 4.5 is about to come out, I think, is that right? you're probably still the product. So over time, conceivably this is going to need to be charged for, because the compute power, you probably have heard, far exceeds the amount of money that's being generated through user fees. And so they're going to have to monetize this effectively, because the valuation only gets you so far. So be aware of the cost factor as it will play out over time. The thing that's directly related to that is it's very easy for us to develop an over-reliance upon technology when it seems to be so magical and so amazing. And so having a plan around its deployment should ensure that you don't end up in the situation that you get rid of your workforce, or you lose your 2 or 3 most valuable folk, and then the price gets cranked up too far, or they work with your competitor and they have a strategy in place that doesn't allow them to work with everybody inside the industry, or something different, and you're left kind of standing high and dry. The other aspect of that, of course, is that in the early days of an application, often they're very cheap or they're free, and then as that gets better and as their market share increases, then the price of that will go up. And so be aware of that kind of gotcha over time, the cranking up of the thumb screws of price. The last is the human element, and so we can, I've continued to talk about the human aspect of this, deploying this technology, because currently the ability to extract value is based upon the ability that people you have to write great prompts. So prompt engineering, you've all heard of that, no doubt, firstly. And secondly, being able to check the data. If you've asked ChatGPT to do research on a specific subject that you know deeply, and then you review that research, I assure you that it'll have mistakes in it. Every time I've done that, it's got quite deep mistakes in it. So be conscious and aware of what it is that you're asking it to do, and have the ability to check that stuff. So that's the human aspect. There's some cool stuff happening in New Zealand in AI right now. NetSafe, so they built a bot that enables them to deal with spammers. So people ask you for money, and they tackle the persona of an old man, and so they wasted about 1 million hours of time of conversation with these spammers and scammers in different parts of the world, which is pretty cool use of the technology. And that I mentioned earlier, artificial intelligence delivered conversational platform, or we're doing some really cool things in crime analytics, wildlife AI, protecting the wildlife in New Zealand, our endangered species. And of course, Dan is on our panel, his business LNX, I'll introduce him properly to you in a second. Beware, so it's like I went back again, beware. Assess, whenever you're looking at an external supplier or an individual to help your business out, understand what they have done before, be really detailed about your research, and make sure that you are not paying them so that they may learn how to use this technology, because that will be that is prolific at the moment. It's very prolific at the moment. Things you can do tomorrow. I wanted to avoid doing a prompt engineering session because you can go to the internet and find those. You can pay $2 to do a course, or just Google the range of different things that are out there. So I thought I'd just approach this from a very high level. We'll start at the bottom. Has anyone heard of There's an AI for That? There's an AI for That. Great website. So there are 6,000 AIs for 1,700 use cases. That's today's number, so that is increasing by the day. You turn up on that site, it's free, it's open source. You enter into there what it is the problem that you're trying to solve, and it will give you suggestions for AI that can relate to that. So that's the single best suggestion that I've got for you, by the way. OpenAI, ChatGPT, Midjourney, and Canva, we've talked about those. I assist through AI-ready companies get to the stage of having a strategy to be able to deploy inside their business, so let me know if you'd like to talk to me. Some hits and misses. Do you want to talk, please?
Sure.
Yeah.
Cool, yeah, okay, right. Wasn't expecting to do this, but our team, Attention Agency team, have obviously been toying with the tools for about the last 9 months or so. Some much more so, with some success than others. This is obviously a slide full of fails. Let me point out my amazing stump feat. The context here was that Jordan, our digital designer, took our headshots that we have on our website, and just for shits and giggles basically, asked Adobe's generative fill to create our bodies based off of what it knew about our heads. And so this is the result. I have stumps for feet. Olive, poor Olive has got a cigarette, she doesn't even smoke, and she's also floating on a mountain. And whatever shoes those are, not sure. Amber has got weirdness going on for hands. And Ryan seems to have lost his feet into a desert. So that's the state of generative film right now. This is 11 Labs, which is an amazing text-to-speech tool. So one of the things that we do a lot of in the agency is we need voiceovers for videos, especially when, let's say, the speaker or the thought leader themselves is not necessarily competent in voicing their own content. We will pay a professional voiceover artist to voice something over. This tool takes a script that we give it and gives us a voiceover. This is, the limitation is, of course, that they only provide American accents, so it's not helpful if you're looking for a Kiwi or an Aussie or any of those sorts of things, but I imagine that problem will resolve itself in quick time. So this is
Your marketing
AI.
nightmare. So many channels, so much software being thrown in your face. You want to sell to your perfect customer, but you're also afraid of eliminating others. You need to see ROI on every dollar, but find it impossible to attribute. Your ads get amazing engagement, but people don't buy. Stop the madness. Download our ebook now to learn the 5 mistakes killing your digital marketing. Your sanity and sales will thank you.
Now he sounds really cheesy, but that's not even a man. That's actually AI. So also in that use case scenario, when there are mistakes, you don't have to get your voiceover artist back into the studio. You can literally change the words and have it pump out the voiceovers. I can see some nodding here from one specific use case about this. This one right here is just a bit of a lull. This is Adobe's Text to 3D. Jordan asked it to give us a red car. What do you guys think? It's a little unfortunate, sort of remind me of Sims. Again, one of those things that we imagine will really rapidly improve over time, but just that's sometimes what you can get right now, unless you're asking really good questions and giving really good prompts. Oh, thank you. And this right here is adcreative.ai. Who has seen the proliferation of ads by these guys right now? Yes, lots of you. Yeah. So these guys offer a service where you basically upload your brand kit, so your colors, your fonts, some images, and some key messaging, and it promises to spit out hundreds of ad creatives for you. And what it actually does is just has hundreds of the same templates that you and every other brand who is uploading their stuff, it wedges your stuff into the same templates. And as you can see, each one of these would need individual finessing, because they haven't managed to make things fit right necessarily. It's totally not on brand for some brands. So if you entered, let's say, McDonald's brand fonts and colours, you'd get the same templates, maybe with the picture of the hamburger that they might have uploaded there. So beware of, they've got very, very slick ads, and I was super excited about this tool because we do have to create a lot of different varieties and variations on creative. This one is a real dud for me right now, but I also imagine will improve really quickly as well. That's it. I have heaps of other examples of these that we just don't have time for, so if you have a specific use case and you want to know what we've tried, we're happy to talk about it.
So, the point that we are at in history is one that is full of promise, full of hope, full of opportunity, and also has some pitfalls and some challenges that need to be overcome to be able to realise some value from it. It can feel a little uncertain, but I would encourage you, if there's one thing that you've taken away from today, it's to give you the confidence to go out and try some things with a bit of a plan, iterate upon those things, and just get involved. Just get involved.
Here's what I found.
Thanks, Siri. Much appreciated. Can I invite our, thank you. Invite our panellists to come and take a seat, please. Right, so we'll start with Tina, you've met. She's hard to miss. Dressed in hot pink, as you know, she's my wife.
It's not Barbie related, by the way.
So Tina's the founder of the Attention Agency. Historically, she was head of NZME's social and digital environment, and she hails from a background as a journalist, and so she was a journalist in the entertainment space and was executive editor of the Remix business and magazine. So please welcome Tina. To her left, your left, is Daniel Shu. So Dan's the CEO and founder of Element X. So they're an AI engineering company, and they're pioneering a whole lot of different things to serve humanity. He holds a PhD in bioengineering and an honours degree in mechatronics engineering. Plus he's also got a bunch of patents that have been used, and he's been featured on the BBC. It's always really funny when people read stuff out about you, you're like, oh, stop it, stop it, stop it. His objective is to create massive economic wealth through technology for New Zealand. Making economic wealth through technology for New Zealand. Please welcome Dan. So Jenny's right, as Jenny's saying. So Jenny's a data scientist and a product lead on the founding team of Kiwi analytics startup Multitudes. She's got a keen interest in how technology impacts upon our world and is leading the way in a number of different fronts, particularly in relation to ethics and climate change, utilising technology to track and do some stuff about climate change. And she's the co-founder of Climate Club, which is a resource for people who care about climate change. So look that up. Right, questions? I'm going to start with you, Tina, if that's okay.
Sure.
And if you've got a question, just kind of brew on it for a second, and then we'll come around to it once we've worked through this couple or three here. So let's talk about the quality of the content produced by AI. Tina, what's your view?
Obviously, I think that I've just shown a few examples of some good stuff and some average stuff. And I think that we are in a state where I think we're in a quagmire of average content anyway. And with these tools available to basically everybody, I can expect that quagmire to become deeper and worse. So the table stakes will be higher in general, but it'll be so hard to stand out. Everybody has access to the same tools, and they're all learning on the same models. And we have seen, I think a few weeks ago, 3 household New Zealand name brands sending EDMs out with the same opening copy. It was very clearly written by ChatGPT with a hint of change. And that is obviously, we're early days in using these types of tools, but that sort of homogeneity in content is something that I think is something we should watch out for. So maintaining separation and difference and differentiation in your brand is going to become even more important. So in terms of quality, yes, I think it'll be easier to produce this sort of thing, and I think it'll be harder to stand out.
It's interesting because you talked about table stakes, and so what essentially this will do is either lower or raise, depending on the organisation, the level of expected content that we are producing and that we're generating for the real world. I hark back to 2016, 2017 when bots became a thing, and it was a space that I was in, chatbots kind of thing. And so what the world was released onto it was a whole bunch of really mediocre, really poor language model driven bots that didn't understand basic NLP, and so the bar was incredibly low. The consequence was that they were mostly pulled. They were immediately sunsetted, and so for a lot of organisations they spent millions, if not tens of millions of dollars on this without a really clear use case, without a clear vision, and they then had to retract things once it was unable to do what they expected it to be able to do. Jenny, I'm going to turn to you and open up the subject about ethics. Bit of an open-ended question to start with. What does ethics in AI actually mean?
Yeah, so I think when we talk about AI ethics, especially in the context as consumers, so we're not the ones that are developing these AIs, we're not the data scientists and AI engineers, I think we could think about it similar to just ethical business. And so, when you think about ethical business, what comes to mind? Circular economy, fair wages, equal pay, no slavery, no child labour. And so, and why are these things important? It's important because biases and inequalities do exist in our world. Sexism, racism, homophobia, it's all real. And so, so in order to, if you think it's a good idea to combat that, then thinking about business and thinking about the way that we do our jobs in an ethical way is important for that. And so when it comes to AI, what we're really talking about is, does the way that we use AI in our business and how we apply it, is that going to exacerbate these inequalities, or is it going to reverse it or do something to mitigate it? And so I think when we talk about AI ethics, a good way that you can apply it to your day-to-day is asking yourself the same questions you would do of any business question. So who's benefiting from the products and services we're selling? Is that benefit realised equally across our audience? even the audience itself, it's a question like, why do we target this audience? Why do we, sell to these people and not these other people? And so, yeah, I think when we're consumers of AI, it doesn't really change the fundamental questions of what makes our business a good business.
It's interesting you talk about biases. Back in 2016, Microsoft released a bot on Twitter called Tay, and it took not long for the trolls to discover that Tay existed and that she was in an unsupervised machine learning environment. So they started to taunt her with racist comments, and within 24 hours she was making positive exclamations about Hitler. She was being very xenophobic, and she was being very racist. So tell me your view on how we combat that kind of biases as it relates to the deployment of artificial intelligence.
So again, talking about consumers, because I'm assuming we're all going to be the ones using these AIs and not building them. There's a whole other set of things you can do when you're building these AIs. A lot of the models that are out there now, so ChatGPT is a really common one. When it first came out, it didn't have a lot of these guardrails in. I was kind of shocked that they just put it in the world and people were like, oh, just play around with it. But since then, they've really learned from that feedback, and they have put guardrails around generating toxic content. Having said that though, so ChatGPT still just trains on the internet, and the internet has a huge range of information, some of it false, some of it very discriminatory, and so, and also ChatGPT trains every few months, so it's never going to be right up to the minute with fake news or things like that. And so when you're using it, there's actually a lot of things you can do with prompt engineering, so how you write the prompts to get it to mitigate some of these biases. There was one experiment done where someone was trying to get it to complete a sentence about straight, gay, bisexual, and trans people, and then also same for a number of different races, so white, black, Asian, and it'll be like, can you complete the sentence? And the rate of negative and toxic content that it generated for non-white, non-straight people was just far higher. But then they experimented with how they put in the prompt, and when they noticed that when they added something as small as, can you complete the sentence in a polite and friendly way, that massively reduced the amount of toxic content that it just generated on its own with no prompting, you're just saying complete the sentence on a neutral sentence. And so prompt engineering is one way. Another way, I think, is the human in the loop. So as you say about the context, that is everything when it comes to using data, not just AI. And so bringing your own human context into it, actually reading through the information and really reading it. Because I think we're talking a lot about text, but any of this sort of generative AI content, it's really good at sounding very confident and correct, but it's often riddled with very subtle inaccuracies that you can't pick up on unless you're really concentrating. And so, bring your human perspective, your human expertise. We're all in this room because you're an expert in some domain. And so that is still really important more than ever today with these technologies.
Cool. Good to grab that back. My helpful assistant just told me we need this so we can record and capture things for later on. Sorry, Dan. So Dan, over to you though. Maybe take that mic off the stand and you can pass it around a bit easier than getting the stand going. So Dan, what's the worst thing that could happen if you don't plan for nor execute the deployment of artificial intelligence well? Worst case scenario.
Thanks, Josh. That's a good question, because Tina's obviously found quite a few hits and misses with AI, and you can see how without the proper care into releasing something, a lot of damage could be done. And recently, this has kind of been on everyone's minds because OpenAI's kind of dropped ChatGPT out into the world, and obviously that's been hugely without a lot of the guardrails and safety behind it. So I think there's definitely regulation or things like that coming. But in terms of very specific examples I've seen, I recall a couple of years ago when Tesla first released its one of its self-driving algorithms, and there was this massive flaw in the software where if you take a stop sign, like a octagon type stop sign, and what they realized was that if somebody had gone and done some graffiti over it and you colored in specific parts of the stop sign, that would confuse the AI to think that rather than a stop sign, the car should be speeding down the highway at 45 miles an hour So obviously a huge security flaw, right? And that's and just recently, another company, some of you may have seen the meal maker function from Pack and Save. This is where you put in a couple of items from your fridge. You tell it what you've got remaining in the fridge, and it'll cook you up a recipe for a meal. And I remember on the night when that was released, our team were playing with it and prompting it, and we were adding ingredients like moldy cheese and bleach, and it will come up with bleach sandwiches or just all sorts of weird recipes, right? But kudos to the team that they very quickly fixed that up and added a lot of guardrails. So you can see very quickly the implications and the potential damage if AI is not productionized or done well with care.
Cool. Whilst you've got the mic, I might ask you, as a company that assists organisations in automating, producing AI that's helpful for their business, you'll be seeing both a range of use cases and also a range of different types of technology that's emerging. So what are you excited about at the moment? What's the things, a couple of examples of things that you've seen or done that you're like, well, this is really cool and this is going to be hugely impactful beyond the kind of nifty use cases that we've all experienced with, DALL-E, Midjourney, etc.
Definitely, I find the hot topic at the moment is around generative. Everyone is looking at how can I use AI to be generating content, generating images, video. We had a company come to us around generating 3D characters, so like similar to the red car example, but they were in the video game business. So there's a lot of potential disruptions or capabilities coming. One area that we're finding a lot is around generative code, and this is around the ability for AI to help assist and actually write software that then does other functions. So very quickly imagine a world where a person who just wants for example, I want a security camera to do a thing about my cat door whenever my cat brings in a mouse. So I could just write that into a box, and then the box will then turn that into software and all the plumbing behind it and just make it work. And so one thing that I'm seeing a lot more is just how when AI is well executed, it actually falls more into the background. We don't really know it's there. It just simply works.
Yeah, that's a great example. It's like the Google Maps, for example, which has got AI for optimizing of routes, and so when it works well, we don't even know that it is there, and we've been using it for a number of years to the same effect. Tina, other than the tools that sit around generating words, images, and video, some of which we've discussed today, how else will AI impact sales and marketing?
I think there are lots of ways, but if I can take a step away from its production capability of words and images and video, I think another really cool potential way that this is going to help anyone in sales and marketing is audience research, behaviour research, persona development. I heard a really cool use case of a business that was really struggling to find its product market fit, and they asked ChatGPT to basically tell them exactly what the real pains are for the customer in that sector, and it spat out something like 32 commonly mentioned phrases with this, I think it was a CFO type audience, like a CFO type buyer, and they had not even considered a lot of the frustrations and pain points that were even brought up in that. And that really completely changed the positioning and the marketing messaging, which they'd not even considered before. And I think, given the vast data that ChatGPT, for instance, has access to, doing audience research, understanding consumer buying behaviours and that sort of thing in your research phase will help shape the key messaging, which will then impact what you ask it to create on the content front as well. So I think, yeah, definitely the consumer research piece is something that I'm quite excited about.
Yeah, cool. Let's switch gears a sec. Dan, you mentioned this a second ago, regulation and government's involvement, and this is an open-ended question for anyone who chooses to participate, and I think there could be a bit of a good debate debate that goes on here. And so there's two schools of thought. We should let the genies out of the box, we should let it kind of do what it wants to do, and then it'll land where it needs to based upon consumer desire, investment appetites, and then where it lands, generating effective use cases, etc. The other is that we should regulate the shit out of it because this is Pandora's box and we don't know where it's going to go and there's too much risk for humanity. And so what are you guys' views on governance regulation? Should the government get involved in this or should we just kind of let it go? Jen?
Yeah, I've got some initial thoughts. So I think the very least that could be done, which is just being done at the moment in the EU with the new AI Act, is being transparent about when AI is used. So something as small as a tiny little fine print or a little icon that says, you know, this image or this video or this whatever was created with the help of AI, that can go a long way towards being transparent about when it's being used versus when there's a human that's built the thing. And so I think that's pretty, you know, it's like a no-brainer to me. It doesn't diminish the value of the thing at all. It just helps the consumer, the person on the other end of the screen, actually be well informed about how this thing came about. And so, yeah, that's already happening in the EU. I think that's a very light touch sort of thing. In terms of other regulation, I think it depends on the use case, because obviously there's like generating text and images which can be used for any range, like a huge range of things, but there's things that we haven't talked about because I guess it's less applicable for marketing is how AI is used in warfare, how AI is used in medicine, housing, employment, education. There are all of these, like security, policing, and so, yeah, in those sorts of domains, it's the, like, how are we using the AI and how do we regulate those specific applications, which I think is a really interesting question.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
I think you're right on the mark there, Jenny, because the tension is if you regulate the hell out of it, you'll stifle innovation, right? But then there are certain areas or use cases where I was watching a Netflix documentary the other day, and it talked about these people who they were telling the AI to make the most potent or dangerous drugs to humans. And it came up with like 50 recipes of like unseen chemicals that were like 10 times more dangerous than the most deadliest drugs in the world. And I remember like when ChatGPT first came out, like people were asking like, how do I make a bomb in my garage? You know, you're going to have use cases like that where you do have to put some fences around. And I think that's we can't just rely on companies being responsible all the time. So there will be use cases where we do need to have that intervention at the front of it. But there's a careful balance.
Mm. Mark Andreessen, who's one of the leading venture capitalists in the Valley, his opinion, and I'll share that, this is not my own, just sharing his opinion, is that if we regulate too much or too soon, the big risk for the world is actually what's happening in another part of the world, which is China. And so China has a very long-standing, hugely well-funded program around AI, and their intention is clearly stated that they will desire control of their citizens. And so in the West, Mark's opinion is if we allow China to get ahead with the utilisation of the technology and we get left behind, then because of the old exponential multiplication, Moore's law that we were talking about earlier on, then the gap could become too large and we have some nefarious actors that might be choosing to play in the space in a way that in the West we may not be. We may or may not be, I'm not saying the West is perfect, and again I'm sharing Mark's opinion, but any extrapolations or anything to add to any of that there, guys? You've got the mic there too.
No, I just want to, elaborate on what Dan just said there about we can't always trust businesses to self-regulate. Major case in point, Meta and Twitter, they were asked to self-regulate and trusted them to self-regulate, and they became these platforms for a lot of disinformation and creating of divisions in society, and there's all those things to worry about. And from a business perspective, go back to the regulation thing, being very careful not to put all of your eggs into a basket for a platform where if regulation does happen, you are all of a sudden no longer able to use that technology in the way that you intended, and then you're left high and dry. Case in point is, back in my time when I did work at NZME, we relied very heavily on social media to drive a lot of traffic to their sites, and of course they sell advertising based on the number of eyeballs, and then Meta just decided to up and change the algorithm, and the technology that you've built your entire business on just changes and you have no control over that. So being very careful about not relying on regulations to stay the same or the companies themselves to keep the product the same is important.
Okay. So it's about the time that we turn to the audience and ask for any questions. I can see most of you. Is anyone going to be bold enough to put their hand up and ask a question? There's a scratch in the nose, so, anyone got a question? Okay. So we've got three experts here, and so you, at varying levels, consume different content as it relates to artificial intelligence and use cases. But what would your suggestion be? The audience has heard what my suggestion is, but it may well be that you've got different ideas or approaches around how people could embark upon a path of becoming more informed and capable of using this technology. So where do you start, and what things, what resources would you direct towards people towards?
Cool. One simple answer, other than there is an AI for that, is sign up to a newsletter called Future Tools. For anyone in sales and marketing, this guy does an amazing wrap-up of the inventions of the week, new developments, especially in sales and marketing AI technology, and basically you don't have to do any of the research yourself. He does a very good job of it. That's a great place to start for having information about these things.
Yeah, on the more data ethicsy side, I think a great place to start is there are a few documentaries on Netflix and things, The Social Network, you might have heard, The Social Dilemma, you might have heard a bit about that, about how the algorithms used in Facebook, Twitter, all that, how that impacts the individual and also society. Weapons of Math Destruction by Cathy O'Neil, very readable, very easy to understand book that talks about how algorithms can be used for good and for evil and how that impacts us day to day. And the last one, which I think everyone should read, is Invisible Woman. That one's about how data bias impacts how the world we live in and all the things that we build on top of this data, where often women and other minorities are excluded from the data that all these tools are built on. So yeah, Weapons of Mass Destruction, Invisible Woman, and The Social Dilemma.
We'll share those when we follow up afterwards. Thanks, Jenny. Dan?
Those are really good resources. I think nothing beats trying and having a play, and the barrier to entry is now lower than ever. And this guy, he's often touted as the godfather of AI, a guy called Andrew Ng. He created Coursera and went on to create a lot of companies. He made a statement about AI is now the new electricity, which literally is like AI is as cheap as electricity these days. You have plans starting from like $29, or a lot of them are free, like ChatGPT. So the access is now just a credit card. So I just highly encourage everyone to just go and experiment. Go in with a curious mindset and discover for yourself what the capabilities are.
Cool. Let's talk about jobs and people, because that tends to be one of the very first questions that people ask is, are we going to be displaced as a species? Are we going to be run out by the machines? And are we going to have nothing to do other than sit around and create beautiful, not that great art and drink? So how do we think AI will impact the job market and the employment landscape specifically over the coming years? Who wants to talk to that?
I think first experienced and played with tools and understand AI and its implications and applications. So I'd be asking myself and my team, what skills do we need to be developing right now, and what skills will we be recruiting for 6 months or a year from now? So anyone looking for a job ought to brush up on those skills. Anyone in a job ought to think that's what's going to be required.
In addition to that, Jenny, Dan?
Yeah, I think as Josh mentioned as well, as with any industrial revolution, this happens every single time and new jobs are created out of it. And so, yes, I think there'll be massive job losses, honestly. I think there'll be new jobs created. In terms of marketing and sales, I think the marketing and sales space has had so much disruption in the last 10 years. Everyone here now is already well versed in learning new tools, like learning social media for the first time, learning digital marketing for the first time. That is a massive curve, and I think most of you are probably over it, have gone over that, so props to you. And I think it's that same mindset of learning how to learn and learning how to learn quickly. That's going to be the skill to hone and the skill to hire for. So yeah, it's just that sort of generalist, open-minded attitude that people are going to be looking for, I think.
I love it. We go back to Darwin. So he tells us, and this still holds true today, it's not the fittest nor the fastest that is the most likely to survive. It is the species most able to adapt. And as a species and as an individual, the key and the onus is upon you to be able to adapt and utilise these technologies and these tools that are available Dan, did you want to add anything to that?
So one of the things with, and one of the direction that I'm seeing AI is moving in, and has always been a motivation, is to democratize, is to make things more accessible to people at mass scale. And that's the reason why all these big companies are spending billions of dollars at creating their foundational models so that they can then offer at the individual level a $9.99 SaaS tool. And I think what's going to happen is we're going to have less people who are seen as, I need to have an engineering degree, or I need to have a computer science background in order to use AI for my job. And I think over time AI is going to move more and more, just become another calculator that we use, another Excel spreadsheet type function. So that'll allow us to do more, which at a time where, in terms of where we are as a species, as a humanity, we need to be able to do more. Because we have so many problems in the world. You know, we're fighting climate change, we're fighting social inequality, we have healthcare problems. There are more problems out there than jobs and or people to do them. So we desperately need to do the Robocop thing and put on our augmentation to help us be superhumans.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so fully agree. I think AI is coming at a time when we have the biggest challenges, like literally, you know, climate change. Like we have not faced something like that as a species ever since we evolved to be Homo sapiens. So yeah, I think it's coming at a great time if we use it in the right way. Also, we would talk about, you know, we're all good and we like know how to learn and we're gonna like get it. Lots of people aren't in a position to do that. You know, they don't have the educational background, haven't grown up in that environment, they literally don't have access to a computer. Like there are lots of people who won't have the option to transition to this new economy. And so how do we support those people? Given how fast things are moving, it's going to happen in people's lifetimes. It's not going to be like, oh, well, they'll retire and die and they'll be fine. It's like, no, like there'll be multiple of these sorts of transitions in one person's lifetime. No, not everyone's going to be able to keep up. I guess it's a bit of a philosophical question whether you think it's, you know, a society's role to support those people. I certainly do, and so I think the question then becomes, what do we do? What does everyone do to make sure that those people are not left behind, and how can we use it to, yeah, indeed spread the benefits across everyone and not just have it concentrate in this tiny percentage of people?
It raises the philosophical debate of universal basic income or a living wage, which started back in 2016 when I started AMBIT. That was something that was in the front of people's minds, is because of this displacement that's coming. Some people will be incapable of bringing themselves on the journey, others will choose not to, and so therefore is it incumbent upon us as a society to go on that journey and support them, and so that's something that only you can answer for yourselves. There's a number of employers in the room, so founders and CEOs, and so if you're in business today, how do you go about fostering a culture which encourages folk to get involved, to try and to learn about this technology? We'll start with you, Ted.
Obviously, I think the first place to start is having the strategy that you talked about, having very clear guidelines for how they might go about trialling, testing and implementing. Just, I guess a really key thing is making sure there's not fear there, because they might fear that you might be using these tools to kick them out of a job. It's about upskilling people, making sure that they are current with all of their skills, all of those things. We care about our people. Everybody who employs people does care about their people. And you definitely, in a time like this when there is a lot of fear about change, front foot that. Don't let them think that, you know, without addressing it, you're kind of allowing that fear to swell and conversations to happen. Front foot it, have a good strategy, upskill your people, and give them some guide rails.
Cool. Jenny, Dan, anything to add today?
Yeah, I agree with that, Ken. Definitely on the front foot side, but one of the things that I found for us was we needed to, in our business, we needed to provide very clear guidelines and policies around just what is safe or responsible, how do we use these tools, and things like, and it could be little things like if you're using ChatGPT or in the OpenAI environment, go into the settings, turn off the record chat history menu icon. Or if you want to extra level security, use the Microsoft Azure version, which is the enterprise grade version of that, and that gives you an extra layer beyond that. So giving your team some guidelines around how do I go and experiment and freely.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say is always use these outputs from these generative AI tools as a conversation starter. I really like the example of the company looking for product market fit, and it came up with 32 options. That's the start of a conversation for your product and marketing team to have. It's not, okay, take this and do it, you know? That's replacing humans. Having the conversation is augmenting humans. And so I think always use it as a conversation starter, not like a be-all and end-all oracle truth.
I love it. And so remember back to what I was mentioning earlier on, the human superpower is our ability to integrate broadly, so utilise context and apply it to your thinking when you're evaluating answers that are given to you from the generative AI that exists. So use some sense and use some collective and individual sense to work out what's truly being said to you. We're at the time where we need to go out and have a nibble and a drink. Is there any questions that have cropped up over the last minute or so? It's a very quiet, very stern audience. Yeah, yes.
Hi. This is a question, I think, more for Jenny, and it's about accountability. So we talk a lot about ethics, right? We talk a lot about, okay, this is a conversation starter, but no organisation wants hate speech to go out or something that's very poorly vetted. Like we all know about that, probably that case about the lawyer who used AI, right, in the courtroom. And none of the case law that the AI had come up with was genuine. So I'm just wondering how this kind of, if we're thinking about the jobs of the future, and we're trying to kind of put a foresight lens onto this and think, okay, what kinds of skills are people going to need? Is there an ethics kind of component to this? Does this now become an important skill for the future?
Yeah, so does ethics become an important skill for the future of anyone using AI? Yeah, I think we use ethics, and ethics has a lot of weight, and sort of it's like a slightly intimidating word perhaps, but I think most people have an ethical mindset when they approach the work they do. If you're a lawyer, you're not going to lie. You're not going to make up case law. And so, given that AI is a tool, you should definitely double check your sources, just like you would with any other source. And if you're a graphic designer and generative AI spits out an image that portrays brown people in a really negative way, then that's on you to not use that or to change it or to do something about it. In the same way that if Photoshop, actually bad example, I don't know, if Canva gave you if you're like, Canva, can you give me an ad, and it made an image that looked terrible, well, if you just send that out, then you're a bad graphic designer because you didn't do anything about it. So yeah, I do think everyone should be approaching their jobs with that lens of is this acceptable? Does this meet the standards of my job? And those standards should be grounded in ethics in a broad sense. I guess data ethics, that does require a little bit more knowledge, kind of what we talked about today about how the models are trained on the internet, and the internet's not exactly the most fair and non-discriminatory place. And so being aware of that at a high level and just reading up on that can really help with how you use these tools. Yeah, so I think in short, I think yes, but it doesn't mean you have to become this philosophical professor. It just means use your common sense and do the same thing you do in your normal job. It's just another tool. So would it pass the standard for any other way that you engage with it? Yeah, does that answer the question?
Yes, one part of it. The other part is accountability.
Mm.
If the AI does harm, and that harm's done by a machine, what does the organisation do about that?
Yeah, I think the organisation, I personally think the organisation's liable. It's like, if they're using it, then yeah. And if you're a graphic designer and you put out something, that is your work. It's you can't just be like, oh, it generated it. Well, you told it to generate it, so I think it's just the employee. I don't know. I think it's just another tool. Yeah. But yeah, thoughts?
Yeah, I'll just add to that there are obviously issues around IP, intellectual property, and having confidence that you own the work, the words, the imagery. There's all sorts of issues that have been identified recently about some of these tools utilising artists' works in the product that they've given out. And some of the tools, I believe Adobe writing into their T's and C's that they are going to take responsibility for that. So actually, they're front-footing that. So there is some accountability being taken by the platforms themselves about that. But I think, like Jenny, I agree that there should be policies in place in your business and accountability for the work that you put out. So fact-checking, creative rights, making sure that this is your own general, original work that you can claim responsibility for is the organisation's responsibility. It's, if you're in the business of doing that, then that's part of business.
If you have an employee that makes some form of error, it's not a criminal error, then the organisation is responsible for that employee. If it's a criminal error, then it goes back to the individual. So if they conduct a crime in their employment, then it's the individual's responsibility, not the organisation. So I think that's perhaps a summation of what's maybe been said there, but it's an emerging space. So any other questions?
Yeah, I've got one actually. What key bits of tech or what sort of current technology do each of you think will largely become redundant as generative really starts to evolve and get up on its forums?
Good question. So what key bits of technology are likely to become redundant? It's a good question. We talk about people more than we do about technology.
Yeah.
So yeah, go ahead.
I think perhaps it might start with something as basic as Word.
Right.
Documents, as they are right now, I don't think that we'll be creating Word documents and typing stuff out in the format that we always have done. I think that will probably fundamentally change for a start.
I utilised a service recently to create a lease document. It was a simple lease document, and so they just used a library of terms that existed, and so that will be redundant basically now. So I did that about 9 months ago, and then 2 months ago had to do a different thing, again a simple lease, so I just went to ChatGPT in that instance. So the organisation, if they're not struggling now, they will be at some stage in the future, because they're peddling old technology.
Yeah, it will leapfrog, right? It will leapfrog
Yes.
a whole lot of stuff. The stuff that we rely on so heavily now is just like,
That's right. Dan?
Yeah, this is kind of one of those predict the future type things, and
Sorry.
no, it's great, but I want to put Josh's framework around it, because every new thing needs to be created at the moment with people, and it's entrepreneurs that go and build these new products and services, and the things that entrepreneurs look for are things like the 4 Ds that Josh talked about. So what's dull, what's dangerous, what's dirty, So those are like the things that you think about. What do we currently use right now that is really, it just sucks, and it takes a lot of time. It doesn't give me a good result. It's just really crap, because those are things that will go, because it will attract the people to go build the solutions for those.
Yeah. Got time for one more?
I'm not too sure if this is relevant, but where do you see the physical space? At the moment, an example, I'm trying to grapple with the right framing of the question, but if I think back several years ago, I wouldn't have assumed that I'd go to McDonald's and push in a button to get my order. There's no more counter space anymore. And part of me comes to the Minority Report movie where the lady or the guy walks into the jeans store and says hello to him or her, and then your jeans are now back in stock and they're ready for you to be picked up. So where do you see AI in the physical space for advertising and all that sort of stuff? Where do you see that?
Minority Report had so many forms of new technology, of which a number have now come into real life. And one of them is, speaking of that film, is personalised, customised billboards. And so it's a alpha version, and I've seen the technology in action, whereby through NFT, near field tracking, you identify to the billboard that you're in that area, it knows your preferences, your behaviour, your income, and it serves up an ad which is specific towards you. Just as at the moment, when you go to Google and you're on a website that may not be helpful, the ads that will be on there are probably the sorts of things you were talking about yesterday or searching for the day before. And so this is out in the real world of billboard. We haven't seen them come into mass adoption yet, but that technology does exist today. Is there anything else you guys have come across?
Yeah, no, that actually has happened. There's been a news article recently about that technology being deployed in New Zealand malls, so it is here already, with some scandal around it because it hasn't been labelled as using AI. And if you don't know, if you're not aware, then you're being influenced unduly. And the other thing I would say is, you just spoke about a customer service experience there. How many times have you been into a retail store and had a terrible experience with the service staff just don't know the product, they're hopeless, they won't even say hello to you. It goes back to the thing that if it sucks, it'd probably get replaced.
Restaurants is another example. So should we have humans that are trying to clock where people are at in their food ordering process? I've always long believed in a waiter button or an app on the table, but surely a combination of different forms of technology would enable a much better experience to be delivered both for the restaurateur and also the customer there as well.
I think it will ultimately come down to a matter of choice. There are different, for example, I assume you're probably more of, your preference would be more of a in-person, physical world type environment. There are others whose choices would be more like a Ready Player One world. Put on glasses and that's kind of your whole world. And I think technology just needs to cater for variety of however our preferences need to be. And for example, like one of the areas we're seeing, because we like Josh, we've also worked in customer service, and what we found is there are people who, no matter what technology you put in front of them, no matter how good it is, they just want to speak to a real person.
My parents. So thanks team, it's time that we let you go and have a drink and have a nibble. Please do stick around, and in the meantime, before you do leave, a warm thanks to Jenny, Tina and Dan.